Hey folks, this is Screen Watching. My name's Dan, joined by Simon. As always, folks, there is a little statement they like to drop around, a phrase that they bandy about in the podcast industry. And Simon and I are seasoned podcasters, so, we're very much sort of au fait with, the lingo, as the kids are calling it, the cats out there. The phrase that they use is, a short podcast is a good one, even better if we can keep it to 7.5 minutes. And that's pretty much my sentiment for this week's episode because, look, I'm not going to say it's a quiet week, but certainly I am going to be talking about a new Tim Allen sitcom. So, take that what you will. Folks, this is Screen Watching. On the docket for this week, Simon is putting on his farmer's hat. He's going to have some straw in his mouth, and he's talking about Clown in a Cornfield. I can only assume that that's a scary horror, but, we'll find out. There's a show which has been burning up the charts after being released last week on Netflix. It's called The Eternaut. I finally got a look at it, and I thought it was worthy of a conversation, so we'll talk about that one. What else have you been watching? Great question. Simon's taken a look at The Wedding Banquet and Riefenstahl. I mentioned it was that Tim Allen sitcom. It's called Shifting Gears. It's been around for a month or 2, 3, 4 months in the US, but finally launched here on Disney Plus in Australia. It's called Shifting Gears. It's him, it's Kat Dennings, and hilarity obviously sure to ensue. And I'm going to do a deep dive to a classic film that I only saw for the first time during the week. It's called The Taking of Pelham 123, not to be confused with the TV movie from the 90s called The Taking of Pelham 123, or the 2006 movie with Denzel and John Travolta, also called The Taking of Pelham 123. But the original version and the TV movie are 123 spelt with the letters, whereas the newer movie was just the numbers. Take that information however you need. Folks, this is Screen Watching.
This is not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher, mother!
Secret lover.
What, that's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for a movie.
Alright, Simon, a couple of weeks ago, it was probably last week, I don't really know for sure, you were complaining you had the sniffles, you were feeling unwell. Now, look, I haven't seen you since then, but I think you gave it to me because I've had a devil of a week.
You're living, hello everyone, screen watchers and those not screen watching united all around the world. You're living with a little germ bomb in the form of a small child. I wouldn't say to me.
No, she's fine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just me.
All right, so maybe it was me. Maybe it's... Well, you've been hanging out with all the sweaty masses in cinemas lately too. Maybe it could be any one of the filthy public that follow you around everywhere that might be spreading these diseases into your system.
Look, it's entirely possible.
Possible.
Yeah. I did buy myself a large iced beverage at the last movie I went to, and, you were there, you were sitting next to me. I had to buy it from someone.
Yeah, that's true. And those dirty cinema stuff, people, I wouldn't touch anything they've touched. God, they're horrible individuals. No. That's how they get the job. We have got a mixed bag of films and TV properties, I think they say in the biz this week. So let's get on to chatting about them.
Yeah, let's do that. First up, Simon, Clown in a Cornfield. Let's watch the clip.
They're really big on tradition around here.
Every year, there's this parade where everyone gathers around a Friendo float.
Friendo?
It's the clown on all the Bay Pen corn syrup labels. He's practically a local legend.
I guess, look, I come at this much like Snakes on a Plane, which was that other SEO-friendly movie title. Clown in a Cornfield pretty much peaks with its title, and the rest of the film falls in behind it, and they try to make something out of that kind of witty, kind of enticing moniker that it's been labelled with. The young girl at the centre of this, Quinn, played by very likeable Katie Douglas. Don't know her from anywhere, but apparently she's made half a dozen films. She's pleasant on the eye, and as a screamer, pleasant in the horror movie kind of way. She's been uprooted by tragedy. Her and her adopted dad, played by Aaron Adams, they arrive in this sort of rural burg, I guess you could say, known as Kettle Springs, to restart their lives. She falls in with the cool kids. He struggles with her blossoming inner rebel. But, and here's the big but, the adults of Kettle Springs have this agenda that manifests as the titular crazy clown. Now, little spoiler alert here, technically The singularity in the title is a bit of a fib, but figure out with that what you will. The backbone of this story is this kind of half-baked generational conflict theme, kind of what they did with A Nightmare on Elm Street. Remember in the first one back in 84, it was the parents that created Freddy themselves and they were all to blame, and now Freddy's come back to kill all the kids in their sleep. It's kind of a similar sort of thing here without giving too much away. It's all pretty unconvincing, I've got to say it. There's like 2 scenes in the film which speak to that, and they don't speak very convincingly to it. This was a movie that, as the title suggests, just had a clown/clowns running around doing the kids in with various forms of horrible deaths. It's directed by a guy called Eli Craig, who actually crafted one of my favourite horror comedies of all time, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, all the way back in 2010, which makes me feel so old. But unfortunately, he can't gel all the elements in this one here together as assuredly as he did back then. So you know what you're getting with the title. If clowns scare you and Cornfield scare you, then this one's going to provide a few chills and a couple of bloody deaths. But overall, this is, like Snakes on a Plane, not that much of a big deal in the end. So it's in cinemas everywhere this week.
Now, I've got no questions at all about this movie, but can I throw this at you? It's a question/pitch for the movie that you inevitably greenlight for me. But I've always thought it would be a really good idea to have a... we talk about, in fiction, like a whodunit.
Yep.
But I like to think of it maybe more as like a whodunit, or who do it.
Who do it, yeah,
and
okay.
we set a horror thriller in a clown school. And you know that one of the clowns is going to go crazy at some point, but which one will it be?
Who will it be?
That's what you're sticking with for the entire film. Who's going to snap?
See, now that's a movie I'd watch. In fact, that's a movie I wish I'd watch instead of Clown in a Cornfield. I think that's a great pitch. What a good idea. You never know who the killer is. So they're always in makeup, like in every class, and when they're not at school.
Absolutely.
And they're getting in and out of cars.
And obviously they professionally want to be a clown, so they're all deeply unhinged people.
Oh, clearly. Yeah, they're insane. Yeah. All right, let's make that movie and then review it on this podcast.
I hope we have positive things to say.
It's highly unlikely. We rarely do. All right, let's move on. So, as I say, that's in cinemas everywhere and will probably be on streaming in no time at all. What have you watched this week? Oh, we're not up to that part yet, but I'm just asking generally.
Yeah, well, look, I wanted to talk about a new Netflix series. It's been out for a week, but I had other things to talk about last week, and with the dearth of anything this week to talk about, I swung back, took a look at Netflix's The Eternaut.
Hay algo en el aire, ¿no?
Nieve en verano.
Está helado.
Está cayendo una mierda tóxica del cielo que te toca y te mata.
Vamos, carajo.
Mi hija está en algún lado. Y yo no voy a parar hasta encontrarla.
So in the sodden fields of the TV reviewing landscape, I took a look at The Eternaut, and this was a series which, I'll admit, I had half a sort of very vague familiarity with the Eternauta as a comic property. So this was a Argentinian comic from the mid to late 1950s.
Good Lord. We are digging deep for content this week, aren't we?
No, this is just us being cultured. Yeah, but no, it was this comic that was written back in the day, and Argentinian comic had a lot to say in a very metaphorical sort of positioning about the military and governments, and it certainly had things to say. I got published in an anthology, and because it was good and weighty and obviously had substance, it's one of these books that kind of became part of the canon. So when you are looking at, we're talking on a film and TV podcast. There's obviously films that are in the film canon, like the important films that, provide the backbone for, if you want to be a filmmaker, you really should have seen these films because, there's lessons to be learned.
All that sort of stuff, yep.
Yeah, the 15 for an Orson Welles films that are certainly in the canon.
Your Police Academy 4.
Ski Patrol, yeah, all those.
Yep, exactly, sure, understand.
Yeah, thanks for getting to my joke right before I got to it. So, In the world of comic books, it's exactly the same. So, like, the things you might look at is, say, like Watchmen from, like, a superhero perspective. Mouse is probably, like, another really good one. And the Eternaut is one of these titles. It's been in constant sort of publication for decades at this point. Fancy Graphics, which is, like, a very classy, high-end, like, you know, it's the fancy pants. It's like a Criterion Collection edition. Of comics. Like that's been out of print for a while now, and it's been hard to find. But you can still find various printings of this from around the world quite easy. So that's worth noting. It's been adapted by Netflix. Because this is one of these bits of literary fiction which people have been sort of very interested in for, you know, going on, I'm doing some rough math now, 65, 70 years. Lots of attempts have been made to turn this into TV or film property. There's been miniseries that have been mooted at some point. There were various movies. There were efforts to make it English language. But the one thing that everyone kind of felt was that this is something that needed to be spoken in its native language, being told of its people, because it was a true cultural signifier of the fine people of Argentina. So anyway, Netflix have made the TV series.
Good.
The good news is that for a series which has been through this many efforts to bring it to the screen, and there is such a deep investment from fans of the original text, it's good. This is 6 episodes. The premise of it, because I haven't gotten into that at all yet, basically there's a whole bunch of friends that are in their mid-50s who are sitting around a house. I think they're playing cards. I can't remember now. It's been a couple of days.
Canasta.
Yeah, they're playing canasta. No, they're playing some cards. It's mostly men. There's, you know, I think a wife sort of hover around in the background. Most of them are sort of single middle-aged men.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, as the evening unravels, it's snowing outside, as is the way. But the power goes out. And they're like, what's going on with the power? Anyway, like outside, you can see like there's some colours in the sky and stuff's going on. Anyway, they look outside and realise that anyone who is stepping outside into the snow suddenly kills over and dies. Not
That's
great.
some hard snow. That's really...
Pretty big buzzkill for your evening.
I reckon. Ruin any game of canasta.
So anyway, because these are middle-aged men who are a little bit older than us, they kind of know how to do things in life, Simon. They start sort of finding ways that they can kind of exit the building and partake in the world again. So... it's all
in a heroic fashion, or just to sort of save themselves?
So one of the guys has a ex-wife and shared custody of their daughter, and so he wants to go and see them. Cool. So the guy who owns the house is like, no, I've got a mask, which I can't remember the excuse he had for having it, but, you know, it's a like a gas mask type thing. So they give him the gas mask, they give him waterproof clothing, which, you know, they all tape down, and so he's sent out into the world. So he's our protagonist, sort of heading out there with the mask on, exploring the world. And so that's kind of the premise of the series. Second episode, and I'm only going to go as far as the second episode. I've seen a bit further in, but there's plot elements past that which kind of extend beyond the premise of the show, so I don't want to go too deep in.
No.
But in the second episode, he gets to the wife's apartment and deals with the many people living in that apartment building who are unhappy seeing the one person that it seems to have a gas mask that can exit a building and be able to gather food and water and all that sort of stuff. So we've seen these kinds of stories before, like End of the World. So if you think about like
a little bit Last of Us-ish, isn't it?
I mean, a little bit Last of Us, but I mean, Last of Us was, you know, there's still humans who are able to interact together. Whereas this is kind of about people who are all isolated in small pockets where they've just been trapped while the snowfall has taken place. And there's no way to contact people outside because all electronics are down. Okay, people are just kind of like, are the police coming? They just assume that's going to happen, but, you know, the police are just as well boned as everyone else. But we've seen this in so much fiction throughout the years that I sat down to watch this and I thought, is there really anything new that this can bring to this kind of genre storytelling? And the answer is absolutely not. But while you're watching it, there is something that is just so compelling from the level of performance, the way the characters are structured and interact with one another. Like, these aren't necessarily sort of... a lot of them, like the main sort of core characters, they are sort of good best friends, but even then there's a lot of tensions between them, and it doesn't necessarily feel like everyone's always necessarily on the same page, but there was just something about this sort of small community of people sort of coming together and just working through stuff, and the dialogue was kind of a little bit snappy, and they were all a bit thoughtful, and it's just compelling to watch. It's really nicely shot. I think anyone who's a fan of the original comic will be very happy to see this as the translation that's come out. What I'd probably say is that this falls into some of the problems that Netflix has with foreign language dramas being exported, which is that you can watch it with subtitles, you can watch it with a dub. Neither of those are ever a truly authentic representation of the original language. Okay, and that's always evident when you're watching Netflix productions, because they always remove any reference to the actual place in space that they are inhabiting. So the biggest offender in this one is there's a young woman who's with the middle-aged people who at one point in the second episode, I think it is wielding a gun, and they're like, oh, you really know how to carry that thing? She's like, oh, you know, I was in the military in my home country. Okay, and it's like, well, what country is that? Don't know, but it's a big problem for this series because it's supposed to be in Argentina. It is a cultural remnant that it's metaphorical for government representation through like the 50s and 60s, like into the 70s. Bear in mind, the gentleman who wrote the original book, let's just say he disappeared in the mid to late 70s.
A little too lippy, was he?
Well, not quite necessarily in that way. He ended up joining a resistance movement with his daughters, and not even sure exactly what happened. We don't exactly even know when he died.
Allegedly. We don't want the Argentinian embassy coming down on this.
It's believed that he was that he died in 77 or 78, but there's no there's no clarity there.
All right.
So anyway, because that's sort of been removed from us.
It's Argentinian going in. I think that would help.
Unless you know that, like you're not going to ever have that from watching the show, which is a little bit of a frustration. But broadly, I think very good drama. People will enjoy it. Simon, you're a genre guy. Sit down, watch the first episode. If it kind of feels a little bit sort of, samey, you've sort of seen it before, tap out then. You're not going to see that much more that's going to shock you. But, although there is quite a revelation, but I think that you'll end up sticking with the series because it is quite good.
6 episodes is doable. That's a good binge. So
also,
I'm happy to help with that.
Not 58 minutes episodes. These are like 43 episodes. 43-minute episodes.
This is
the sweet spot.
My afternoon, quite frankly. This is what I'll be doing straight after this podcast.
Yeah.
And it's got Andrea Pietra in it, who seems to possess all the qualities that the superficial male requires, which sums me up. All right, okay, so I'll be watching that this afternoon. Dan Barrett, thanks for the heads up and well spotted. We don't do a lot of foreign/subtitled stuff here. I don't do a lot of those reviews as part of my film segment, but I'm glad we're jumping on this one. This looks really good.
Simon, what else have you been watching?
Oh my goodness, gee, you just rolled straight into that, haven't you? What else have I been watching? The Wedding Banquet. That is in cinemas as we speak. Now, persons of a certain vintage, and I'll include you in this, you'll remember that director Ang Lee had he kind of had two breakthrough hits. He had Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, which I think was him. I hope that's him. And The Wedding Banquet in 1993. It has been updated by director Andrew Ahn. Now, let me just run the plot by you. A gay South Korean expat, his family's business, fortune at stake if he's outed, wants to marry his marriage-resistant Asian American partner. Their best friend couple are a Native American lesbian who wants an IVF baby by her Asian American girlfriend who has her own mother/motherhood issues. So they hatch a plan for the gay guy to get the gay girl pregnant and stage a fake wedding to secure his green card. Now, saying it like that, it all sounds very frantic and wacky, and it could be The Birdcage or it could be one of those sort of La Cage aux Folles type over-the-top gay films. It isn't that at all. This director, Andrew Ahn, offers up a very 2025 reworking of Ang Lee's film that absolutely forgoes... I won't say absolutely, there's a few sort of funny moments in there, but it absolutely forgoes rom-com beats and easy laughs for sort of social issue awareness and character enlightenment arcs and those sort of things, which is why I say it feels very 2025. Now, none of that is a bad thing, of course, and the cast, especially Kelly Marie Tran as the main girl in this who has to get pregnant, and the wonderful Jung Yun Jun who plays the elderly sort of business matriarch. They have a lot of complex emotions, a lot of terrific scenes together. It's overly earnest in parts. There's a lot of very heavy sort of talk in this that puts to bed straight away any notion that this was some kind of wacky rom-com at any point. But it is a very warmly affecting and very sort of honest film. So it's called The Wedding Banquet. Features Bowen Yang, who's getting a lot of work, obviously, from Saturday Night Live and all the work he's doing on the big screen, and the wonderful Joan Chen as well. So that's called The Wedding Banquet. What else have I been watching? I'm sure I put something... Oh, my God, I was watching Riefenstahl. Boy, talk about a pivot. Now, if you don't know the name, Leni Riefenstahl was an actress turned filmmaker who
She was in Navy SEALs, right?
She was in Navy SEALs and then spun that off into Hot Shots Part 2. She was not in either of those films. She crafted two of the most remarkable factual films in cinema history, Triumph of the Will and Olympia back in the 30s. Now, these were documentaries that were snapshots of Germanic ideals. She used breathtakingly beautiful images. Her films have often been held up as ahead of their times in terms of the images she captured. She used montages that celebrated, Aryan physicality and nationalistic fervour and cultural dominance. And when you say all those things in the mid-1930s, straight of all, you've got to ask yourself, how much was she in with a certain Führer's party? And this documentary, which is quite chilling in parts, of course, but it's just beautifully rendered. It's an artful film that profiles Leni Riefenstahl. It addresses the accusations that have plagued her, and since her death in the early 2000s, her legacy. Was she aware of the Führer's motivation in commissioning her talents, and did she adhere to the master race philosophies of ethnic cleansing that he was working up to on such a grand and horrific scale? Through archival footage, the filmmaker is given a lot of voice to, shout denials and defence and defiance. It's entirely clear where this documentary stands on the argument, but the way it's presented is never not balanced or meticulous. So this was I don't know, as I'm growing older, I'm finding a real fascination with that period in history and the horrors of that time, and I always remember my mother being deeply affected by any images from that, and I think that's kind of stuck with me, and I'm learning a lot more about that period. I've seen both of her films, Triumph of the Will and Olympia. As a film fan and as a sort of a film student, I watched those. Putting them in the context of everything that was going on around her, it's hard to sort of say that she was not aware of the role that those films and her talent were going to play. So it played at the German Film Festival and is playing at the German Film Festival over the next couple of weeks, and then it's a Madman film, so it'll turn up somewhere or down the track.
Yeah. Now I'm going to get to, from the, classy art house circuit that you've been delving into just there, into Shifting Gears, which is over on the Disney+. This is the brand new sitcom with a capital Sit, starring one Timothy Allen, who you may know from such...
Our Days in Prison?
Yeah, I was trying to find a way into that. But he was a Santa Claus for a while. There was Home Improvement. He's been around.
He was Buzz Lightyear. We love
Buzz Lightyear. Yeah. I believe Top Bill in those films.
And Tim the Toolman Taylor.
Yeah, well, I mentioned Home Improvement already.
TV royalty, I think it could be said.
I mean, sure, we're forgetting his fairly lengthy run sitcom Last Man Standing as well.
Yeah, never saw an episode. But no, it happened, so I get it, yep.
I'm looking at it here on Wikipedia. It ran from 2011 to 2021.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's got the magic touch when it comes to sitcom, which brings us back to Shifting Gears, and he's partnered with Kat Dennings, big fan, very pretty, very talented comedian. Does all this bode well?
This is your very traditional sitcom. So I've got this theory, which I'm sure I've talked about on this podcast. Maybe it was just outside in the world. I'm not too sure. But I've just got this theory that when we saw the collapse of the sitcom in the late 90s, where suddenly the early 2000s were all about the single camera comedies, so things like The Office and Parks and Rec, and we said goodbye to the majority of the sitcoms. Like the 90s were a really heavy sitcom period.
The golden years, many say.
Yeah, I mean, I actually probably would. I think that as far as sitcoms go, like there were certainly some really great sitcoms in the mid to late 70s and early 80s.
And culturally dominant too. The
culturally
Friends
dominant. And
the Seinfeld
sitcoms have always been a big part of broadcast television, but you kind of hit this period in the very late 90s going into the early 2000s where most of those died off, they fell out of fashion, they weren't really considered cool or hip anymore. And then you kind of had a couple of examples of things like Two and a Half Men, which kind of gave way to the Big Bang Theory. So there were certainly large-scale, big, dominant sitcoms out in the world, but they weren't really considered particularly cool. Like, it's not like back in the 90s where you had your Seinfelds and your Friends and Veronica's Closet. I don't know.
Oh, my goodness.
Carolyn in the City.
Love it.
Partners. The other sitcom
Sybil.
also called Partners. Sybil. Yeah, look.
Sybil.
So many. But you get to this period, they weren't really around. And I actually kind of feel as though you've lost, like, all the generations of learnings that you had where people would work on one sitcom, they'd be trained up in writers' rooms, and then they'd take those skills to other shows, and you'd see that propagation of the skill of writing and crafting a sitcom. Because there was nothing really being created on a large scale of, you know, decent quality through that sort of period for like about 15, 20 years.
And we've spoken of, we've spoken on that on the podcast as those writers that are trained, that were trained on those eras, they're moving out of the writing rooms right now, and it's become harder and harder to regain those skills.
Well, I'm saying, like, they haven't been writing jobs for them for, you know, decades at this point now, and so those skills aren't really quite there anymore. And so sitcoms these days have like a really weird vibe to them. They're a bit sort of hacky, and there's always been hacky sitcoms, like, don't misunderstand where I'm coming from.
Sure.
But like they're only hacky. Like, there's never any sort of good quality sitcoms coming through anymore, because like that muscle memory of the skill of crafting a sitcom, not there. So cut to this show, and it's absolutely in the mold of a modern day sitcom. Lots of really tired, flat jokes. The premise of it is that Tim Allen's character is a conservative guy that runs a motor repair shop. They deal with fancy cars, you know, like street cars and that sort of thing. He's really passionate about his auto. His daughter, who he's had a falling out with, she was a bit of the sort of rebellious teen. I ended up running off with a guy that he didn't care for.
Is that the Kat Dennings?
That's the Kat Dennings character.
I love the Kat Dennings.
As the show begins, she turns up one day in the car that she'd stolen from him when she ran out. And she's back. Her relationship with her husband has fallen apart. She doesn't have any money. She's got her 2 teenage kids. She needs somewhere to stay. So it's very much a premise pilot as we kick things off.
Family dynamic.
Family dynamic. Sure. Obviously, they don't get along, but at the same time, they're family, and so, you know, they're going to find a way to make it work.
It's kind of Roseanne-ish? Is it cut from that cloth?
I mean, politely you could say that.
Yeah, okay.
But it's not good. Like, that's kind of the problem with it. I will say this for the show. I think that, as is the case with all sitcoms, once you get past the premise pilot, it's a little bit better on like a week-to-week basis in terms of being able to stomach it. But at the same time, like, it never really elevates sort of beyond...
Is there one of the great... We mentioned the great sitcom, you know, writers and showrunners of the past. Are any involved in this one?
Look, here's the funny thing. So the pilot episode is written by...
James Burrows.
No.
James L. Brooks.
No. Well, first of all, James L. Brooks was never a writer. But anyway. Well, sorry.
He was. Back in the Taxi day, he was.
He was a writer and also writer-director of his movies, but he isn't writing TV shows anymore.
No.
Yeah.
Barely walking.
Burrows absolutely wasn't a writer.
Right.
Even though he has got, like, created by credits. But anyway, ignore that. That's just a silly tangent you've taken us on. It's Mike Scully and his wife, who I'm just trying to find her name. I think it's Linda
Julie
Scully.
Thacker.
Julie Thacker. But yeah, it's Mike Scully's wife.
Yep. Okay.
Mike Scully's
team, alarm bells.
Mike Scully has a very lengthy career as a former writer / producer / executive producer from a little show called The Simpsons. He's since gone off onto his own to create a bunch of different TV shows, a few animated shows. Notably, and this is kind of what I thought might be really beneficial here, he was one of the writers, producers on the Jared Carmichael show. Okay, which is one of the sharpest, funniest sitcoms I've seen in years.
Isn't that the Subway guy?
No, you're talking about, it was Jared Fogle.
Oh, okay, yeah. I can't imagine.
And that's Jared. This is Jared.
Right.
Jared Carmichael is a very funny stand-up. You certainly know his face. You've seen him in things over the last couple of years.
Well, I'm looking over Scully's thing, and it's 49 eps of Park and Recreation, 31 eps of Everyone Loves Raymond. So this guy knows funny.
Yeah, he's got the runs on the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, because of his association with the Jared Carmichael Show, which is a show that really well integrated social issues in with like a very traditional sitcom setting. Bear in mind, this is the show where one episode is about Jared Carmichael gets tickets to go see Bill Cosby, and he's trying to convince his family to come along with him.
Jeez. That sounds...
And the entire half hour is... Because this is what would happen on the show. Character would enter the lounge room with some sort of ethical issue, and then for 23 minutes, they'd just talk about the issue, going backwards and forwards with each character on the couch. And then, that'd be the end of the episode. Incredible sitcom.
You did the right thing, Bobby. Be patriotic.
Well, maybe it's my fault. I let you boys form your own opinions when I should have been ramming my opinions down your throat. I should have seen this coming when you got suspended from elementary school for refusing to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
It is ridiculous to ask a kid to pledge allegiance to anything. They wanted me to vow loyalty to a country 6 months after I found out Santa Claus wasn't real.
This is America we're talking about. It's not like we asked you to say the Pledge of Allegiance to some crappy country like Slovakia. That would be ridiculous. I mean, I don't even think they got a pledge in Slovakia.
If I lived in Slovakia, I'd kill myself.
All right, I'll have to check this out. I did not know. Stand-up comedian Jared Carmichael navigates through life with his therapist-in-training girlfriend and his heavily opinionated family. That sounds exactly what you just said. All right, well, maybe I should watch this.
Yeah, but anyway, Mike Scully and his wife Julie, they did the first episode for this one, which isn't particularly great, and then they got fired off the show.
Oh, well, that was a longer path to a quick answer.
It was, but I got to mention the Jared Carmichael Show, which doesn't happen nearly often enough.
Up to that. All right, okay, that's good. The Carmichael Show, it's called. Or here is on
Oh, it's called the Carmichael Show. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, it's been quite a few years at this point. Bear in mind, Bill Cosby hadn't gone to prison when that show was airing, so it's been a while.
Jeez, I think we've mentioned Bill Cosby quite enough for a podcast in this day and age.
Let's move on to the final thing this week. During the week, I sat down on Prime Video. I watched a little film called The Taking of Pelham 123. I've never seen this movie before, and within the space of the first maybe half hour of the movie, I realised I was watching what is one of my favourite movies of all time.
There we go. Good. Now, I was a little cautious about this because sometimes we've had words about films which are widely regarded as classics of their era, and you come at me like, yeah, it was all right. And so when you chose to talk about this, I was hopeful that you would be as ebullient about it as I am. So that is a good thing to hear.
What
Favourite
is
part? Favourite actor?
Look, I mean, where do I give my favourite actor on this one? Obviously, it was Matthau. It's hard to... not just immediately sort of fall for that. But what I really like about the movie is you've got the cops in it. It's we think about the modern day version of it, and it's Denzel Washington is one of the cops, and Denzel, he's a man who, he's held things together remarkably well. He's a man where, if in a very modern context you expect a movie like this, is going to end in some sort of fight in a subway system where there's punches being thrown and shirts taken off.
Lead. Walter Matthau was not the heroic lead,
exactly.
Or is it the traditional heroic lead?
None of the cops in this, the cops are Walter Matthau and Jerry Stiller. Okay, neither of them you're expecting to see take a shirt off and battle someone in the subway. That's never going to happen.
No, it's not.
And so what I like about this is that it's really the two of them as people who are just embracing on their workday. Suddenly things just get strange and out of control, and they're just kind of trying to contain it all and work to it. But even at the final sort of 30, 40 minutes of the film where Walter Matthau has left the train officers
control room,
the control room, and he's out doing some police investigative work. Okay, at no point do you ever expect that he is going to be battling physically anyone else. Even at the end where he kind of realizes that he's caught the guy, it's sort of played almost a bit sitcom-y where he sort of turns around, realizes, and turns around, he gives a and that's how the movie ends. It's not a big knockdown fight, and I just thought that was fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
We have to, and I insist that some mention is made at this point of a certain actor called Robert Shaw, who was the lead train hijacker in this one. A chilling and compelling and enigmatic performance by a man who most of us know as Quint from Jaws.
That's how I know him.
And when you have a look at his run of films through the 70s, 1973, The Sting, roll that into Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, roll that into Jaws, then a couple of smaller films, which I know of but didn't survive. Roll that into the role of Sheriff of Nottingham in Sean Connery's Robin and Marion. Roll that into Black Sunday, the great terrorist thriller about the Goodyear blimp exploding over the Super Bowl. And then The Deep with Jacqueline Bisset. So this guy was a big deal at the box office and on big cinema screens through the 70s. A wild man, drunk himself to death, was filming Avalanche Express when he passed away, and they had to sort of finish the film cutting around the scenes that he'd shot. But Robert Shaw is just a force of nature on the screen, and nowhere better than, well, Jaws, of course, but Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. But yeah, if you're like me and it's a film that you've always kind of meant to get around to, but, you know, it's just isn't any good, it's going to feel like a fairly generic sort of, you know, action cop thing from the 70s, press play on it. It really is a lot of fun.
Nails it. Absolutely nails it. Great way to end the podcast, Dan Barrett. That is an excellent piece of classic cinema history that everyone should see when they can. Is it a good Amazon print? Is it the full widescreen? And oh, beautiful.
Looks great.
Great. Great New York film too. There was a period when
fantastic New York
was being
film
captured on film like it rarely has been. It's a great movie. All right,
and also there's lots of cutaway shots where you're above ground outside of the train station and you're seeing just New York in the 70s, and it's just gorgeous looking.
Well, gorgeous. It's kind of a dump, but it was still great to see on screen.
In a way that, you know, you can enjoy it on a cinema screen without having to live in 1970s New York.
Well said.
Yeah.
All right. Tighten this up. Let's go. 12 minutes this was going to be, I remember you saying.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, yeah, sure. This has been Screen Watching. We'll be back next week with more of this. If you like Simon's work, check him out with his Screen Space newsletter. You can find that on Substack. It's a weekly deep dive into the world of cinema. It's got some reviews, it's got some thoughts, some opinions, some pictures of bikini women from various movies that Simon likes. People can find my newsletter. It's very, it's intellectually enriching. It's called Always Be Watching. And that comes out 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, with a bonus TV guide that comes out on Friday afternoons-ish. And
I'm going to have to weigh in on this whole Trump movie tariff thing. I know that dates the podcast, but you did a great piece on it earlier this week in your newsletter, and do go back and have a read of that, peoples, if you get the opportunity.
Well, it's a bit hard to talk about because it's not going to ever amount to anything.
Well, that's
and
the
it's
thing.
ridiculous.
It's a diversion. I hate getting sort of swept up in the fact that, all right, I'm an opinion maker in the industry. I've got to have an opinion, but I'd rather talk about how his brown shirts get kicking indoors and dragging families to Ecuador and that sort of stuff. This is all a diversionary tactic on his part, just to shift the headlines away from the awful stuff he's really doing. But I mean, that's just, I don't want to get political, but here we are.
Yeah, so look, it's all just a bit silly. I didn't even want it, like, you know, there's obviously been sort of developments in the story where people are like proposing stuff and trying to work around things that are never not going to happen. Like, it's all ridiculous. So I've very purposefully steered clear of a lot of that this week. But I did briefly sort of allude to it of the week. But yeah, people can find my newsletter. It's going to Always Be Watching. And Simon and I do this other podcast, which is way better than this one. It's called Best Movie Year. And we look at the moment at the films of 1987. We're going through from the beginning of 1987 through to the end of the year. The best movies of the year are never like at the beginning of the year. No. And we've certainly discovered that. Yes, my wife made the very telling comment to me the other day. I love your podcast. When are you going to do some good movies? Yeah. Fair comment. And that's coming. And we're just 2 weeks away from Ishtar. Oh, hey. Props to the Sydney Film Festival for an Elaine May retrospective, which does feature one of the funniest films I've ever seen, A New Leaf, starring one Walter Matthau. If you haven't seen that, do get along to the Art Gallery Cinema and see that. But they are screening Ishtar. Now, we cannot forget that this absolutely blew through cinemas in 87. Barely anybody saw it then. So this will be everybody's chance to see it on the big screen. Ishtar with Beatty and Hoffman and Isabella Gianni in some woefully outdated racial stereotypical Middle Eastern people, but a lot of laughs as well. And we'll be doing that on our podcast in 2 weeks' time.
And it will be on the podcast.
Yeah. Anyway, Simon and I were about to go off and have a conversation about Hot Pursuit, starring John Cusack. So we'll be back on the podcast next week. Yeah. So you can find the Best Movie Year podcast on all your various podcast platforms. It's on YouTube, which is probably the best way to really engage with this one. Yeah.
You do good work with the YouTube stuff.
Yeah, it'll have clips and stuff in it. You know, it's the way this thing works. Anyway, folks, we'll be back next week with more of the podcast. We'll see you then.